Put God first.
Your presence in their lives gives them validation.
Our children don't need us to be superheroes.
If you do these things, the next generation and the generations that follow will live in a world far better than the one we have today.
Men, stand up, be fathers.
Hey guys, it's Mark, your host and founder of The Inspired Legacy. As always, this is the show that equips and inspires men just like you to unleash your inner lion and reveal your true purpose as spiritual leaders in your home. And I'm going to dive right in today. I'm talking with executive coach Cory Carlson in this episode. Cory is a husband, father of three, and former executive who spent 20 years in corporate America. He's also a man of faith who isn't afraid to coach his clients with their spiritual well-being in mind, while also helping them achieve a healthier work-life balance. Cory has packaged up much of his wisdom in this area in his new book titled Win at Home First, an inspirational guide to work-life balance. It's a practical and eye-opening guide that helps men, and women for that matter, realize that succeeding at work doesn't mean that you have to fail at home. Cory, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, Mark. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to get into this. And for those listening, at the time of this recording, we are still in the throes of this pandemic and our quarantine life. And so I think that as we get into this topic today, Cory's going to have some unique perspective about how we can, as fathers and men, win at home during this this unique opportunity that we've been given to, most of us are spending a little bit more time at home. And so I just think it presents some unique opportunities. We're going to dive into all that. But Cory, before we get going, I always kind of like to qualify my guests and have you give us a little bit of your dad bio. What do you got going on at home?
I am married, been married for 20 years and have three kids, a 15-year-old girl, 12-year-old girl, and 7-year-old boy. So it is definitely fun. You mentioned the time we're in the quarantine. I am very grateful for the ages of my kids during this time. For any of the listeners with the young kids.
Oh man, yeah.
Definitely in our thoughts and prayers, because that's difficult times to try to keep 1, 2, 3, 4-year-olds entertained. We have different difficulties with the ages of our kids, but as a whole, it's been an enjoyable quarantine.
Yeah, your kids are old enough to be totally self-sufficient, but yeah, my heart goes out to those folks with young kids as well. Our youngest is 11 and he's still fairly self-sufficient and can do most of his schoolwork on his own. But yeah, you're right. Those parents with the young kids, I don't know how you would do it, honestly.
Yeah, I don't either. Without pulling out the hair. And I've got a few clients that are both working like double income. And without having the nanny for a while, they were trying to do it all themselves. And literally, like, one would be on a conference call from 12 to 11, then high five, and the other one goes to their conference call and high five and back and forth. And some stressful times that definitely look forward for them getting back to the norm.
Yeah, for sure. And what's normal going to look like going forward? That's a question in everybody's mind as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, man, before we get into your book, why don't you tell everybody, and I touched on it briefly in the intro, but kind of explain what you do for a living and how you help men out there.
Yes. So I help business executives, create a legacy for themselves. Much like the title of your, podcast, but the idea of creating a legacy by winning at home and work. So as I was an executive before. I had a 20-year career that took me from Kansas City, where civil engineering degree, got involved in sales for technical products. I sold bridges and storm sewer, grew the territory. So then typical sales trajectory, you then get promoted to be a manager. And I moved to Denver, Colorado, where I managed a bunch of states and people. And I got promoted and moved to Cincinnati. And in Cincinnati, I was a VP of a $100 million division. Loved my job, but it got to this point where I leapfrogged my old boss, so I was managing him. I was managing people older than me. My work-life balance was getting out of whack. I was starting to wrap my identity around the success or the lack of success in the role.
Sure.
And it just started to get heavy on me. And I really liked my boss at the time. So I talked with him to say, Tom, I love when we get to connect. I learn a ton, but we're never together. We're crossing, the country on the plane all the time because we were traveling every week. And he's like, get an executive coach. I've always had one. I was like, really? It's that easy? I wish you would have told me. So I went and looked around, found some different executive coaches to interview, if you will. And the shorter stories, I found one that also was faith-based and was not only incorporating leadership tools and concepts, but with business books of Good to Great, things like that, but also incorporating the Bible. And like this is exactly what I want, because I was also on a faith journey at that time as well, or wanting to grow in my faith and figure out how to integrate my faith into my work. I had never had a business mentor show me kind of the best way to do that. So ended up hiring him as a coach. His name's Brandon. Hired Brandon as a coach, used him for an hour a week for about 4 years. So just soaking up everything he was sharing. I was turning around and using it on the people that reported to me. And then what ended up happening is, as I was sharing this content with my direct reports, I started to see them be intentional with their spouses, being more intentional with their kids. And yet our bottom line was increasing. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I don't want to just do this to the people on my team. I want to go do this for hundreds, thousands of men. And about 4 years ago, I left my corporate job, which is a whole story in itself, walking away from the salary and there's all those corporate benefits.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
To begin building the coaching practice. And what I do now is I work with executives, a lot of one-on-one type calls. There's also group, speak at companies. Obviously, that's down quite a bit now, but was doing keynotes and running workshops, but to help leaders when at work and at home. And really so anyways, that's what I do now.
Man, there's a lot there that I'd like to go back and touch on. So I'm curious, not to get off track, but you mentioned leading a former boss. I'm just curious, how did that go over and how did you handle it? How did he handle that and how did you handle that?
Yeah, it went well. We ended up going well, but no, there was definitely, challenges at different times from it. And I think one of the best things that, and it also came from a mentor sharing this with me, was just being upfront at the beginning of that relationship. Like, this wasn't my choice or your choice. It was someone else's choice. And we're both going to be evaluated on how this works.
Yeah.
You've got a territory that we have got to make sure is successful, and I'm going to help you get there. And I don't have all the answers, but I will hustle to figure them out. Whether it's finding out different resources within inside our company that can help get things done, or whatever it may be. But my success is dependent on your success, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're in your territory almost as a lone wolf, you're going to get taken out. I'm going to do my best to get other functions of our company to support you. And also just having that posture of vulnerability and honesty of, there's more things about this product line than I may. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's putting your humility aside. I think that's key. Well, I'm curious, you mentioned finding a coach that also integrated aspects of the Bible. Was that hard to find? Because I don't know. I don't have a sense for how common that is in the executive coaching world. And then B, how do you feel that impacted your trajectory?
Yes. Trajectory on what? Just so make sure I answer what you're thinking.
Well, like just the concept of integrating faith with your career, because a lot of people keep those very separate.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. For me to find a faith-based coach that integrated not only just the Bible and prayer and scripture. Like, I don't want it to sound like that. It's actually, no, there are concepts that we use that are kind of rooted in this idea of Jesus and of God, and then even pulling scripture as it made sense. And for me, it was a game changer. It was a game changer for a couple different reasons. Before I learned of this coaching and this framework, I was like a lot of people probably listening. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to depend on my own striving, my energy to get things done. And it really helped me to actually know, I don't control the impact. I've got to work hard, but I don't control the impact.
Mm-hmm.
There's a verse that Psalm 127 where it talks about, basically where God gets the midnight shift. For us to labor in vain, let God take care of the night shift of, and it's just like, wow, that, because the old me would have just like, I got to strive. I'm in sales. It's like, go, go, go. And now there's a piece that I can hit pause. Hit stop and move on.
Yeah.
And so that's been very helpful. It helped me my theology just because I didn't have a ton of great theology going into this relationship. So getting pointed at different verses or different concepts that we use. And so that was very, very helpful. And to answer your first question, are there a lot out there? No, there are some out there for sure. I definitely don't want to mislead anyone saying that we're the only source. There are some out there, but no, there are many more secular coaches out there. And partly because some are maybe timid to bring their faith into the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in my situation, if I've got a business owner or a client where I can talk about Jesus and faith and tying some of these tools, concepts into the word, I will. Now, if they say, but I want you, when you come to my office or to our conference and speak, I need it to be more secular. So then instead of using a Jesus quote, I will go find a Steve Jobs quote.
Sure.
Drive them to greater purpose. And I've had to do that at different times. But the sweet spot is if I can work with a individual or even a company, if they are open with their faith, then that's awesome.
So you were in the executive world and you were pointed towards hiring an executive coach. You loved the process so much and felt the impact of that so greatly on your own career that you were like, man, I want to return this favor to other men. And that's kind of how you got into coaching yourself, which kind of led into the book. So let's dive into this book. It's called Win at Home First, an inspirational guide to work-life balance. Beyond what the title tells us, Cory, give us the 411 on this thing.
Yeah, well, I never thought I was going to write a book at all. It wasn't on my radar. And some of that's head trash. Some of that's lies I believed. And whenever I did, the thought of a book entering was like, oh, I can't. I'm a civil engineer by degree or a sales guy. I don't write books. So I dealt with that. But the reason for the book is as I was coaching people, I would get hired to help them with their company situations, help with vision and values for the organization, and look to improve culture. I have that sales background, so maybe it was, hey, we need some help on business development. And so those would be the reasons I would get hired. But what would happen often, Mark, is on the one-on-one calls, what really was keeping the executive up at night wasn't any of those. It was, how can I be more intentional with my spouse?
Yeah.
How can I get more engaged with my kids' lives? How do I drink less? How do I lose 10 pounds? Like, those were the things that were on their mind more so than the day job. And I kept saying this phrase, hey, we're going to work on the vision and values for what you hired me. We're going to work on how to equip and empower your employees better. However, in order to do that, we're also going to have to work at winning at home first. Because as a leader goes, so goes the company. And if things aren't going well holistically for you, it's going to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in this day and age with smart, not only smartphones, but like iWatches, whatever it may be. You could be in a meeting at 9 a.m., but still dealing with shrapnel from an argument you got with your spouse early in the morning. And so you're in this meeting trying to bring your A game, and then you're looking at your watch, getting text with the fight still continuing from this morning. Or at the end of the day, 3 o'clock, 3:30, you start thinking about the commute home, and you just start to get these negative feelings of, I got to deal with this, or I got to confront my son, or I got to confront my daughter about this particular issue, whatever it may be, that it starts to negatively impact our day job. So what I would work with clients is helping them, hey, we're going to work on things at home as well as work at things at work, and work in parallel. Because a lot of things work in parallel from the standpoint of, hey, do you have a vision and values for your company? Oh, do you have a vision and values for your family? Equip and empower employees, there's a lot of similar truths to equipping and empowering your children, and balance between truth and grace. And so it worked out really well, almost accidentally. But that just became what the book was. So a lot of the content that I would walk through clients with is in that book, where the book's in 4 parts. Part 1 is you've got to better understand yourself, make sure you're healthy. The idea that on a plane, right, you get the oxygen mask on your face before you give it to others. So there's a lot of pieces helping you become a better you. Part 2 is marriage. That relationship in the home is the most important one between you and your spouse. 3 is on parenting and how to be intentional with your kids. And then 4 is on work, engagement with your customers, your employees. And so that's the flow of the book.
I think that's pretty key. And I'm fortunate enough to work at my full-time day job, a company that takes a similar approach. And we have a mantra of faith, family, work in that order. And because we realize that, when things are messy at home, you're not going to be bringing your best self into the office, because that's the foundation. You've got to have that security at home, that stability, to bring your best to the world. I want to revisit the vision and values comment that you made. That stands out to me. So, without getting into the nuts and bolts of how to craft vision and values in the business world, like, how do you approach that for a family? How do you deploy that, so to speak?
Yeah, so in the book, I actually provide framework of crafting one, which I'd be more than happy to talk about right now anyways. But just for those that want to dig deeper in the book, it actually kind of walks through this process of the 5 V's, which is putting together your vision, your values, vehicles, valuation, and vocabulary. And it's been super helpful, not only to my family, but to, tons of clients that have incorporated as well. But starting with the vision, to answer your question there, I mean, the vision is kind of what you feel called to do as a family. Like, what makes your family unit different, distinctive than all the other families on the street in your neighborhood? And, what is that good news that your family wants to bring to the world, and just kind of thinking through of what makes us different than the others. How are the Carlsons different? How are the Hendersons different? What are ways that make us distinct and what we want to do? So it's based on your experiences, your giftings, just the personalities of the family, kind of how you are. And so that becomes the vision piece. And then the values is kind of who you are and how you act, and kind of what you value. And just like a company, you can have aspirational ones that we're trying to get to, but they could also just be aspirational that you're not even getting to. And so it's trying to figure out that right balance between what's actual, what's aspirational. And so then walking through the vision and values is super helpful.
Yeah. And the way I look at it, obviously I look at it through the lens of, the inspired legacy. And it just seems like such a valuable tool or process, if you will, to put the pieces in place that will ultimately build that legacy that so many of us men want to leave for the next generation. What is the vision that we want to cast to our kids and our grandkids and those future generations? What values do we want to instill? And it's one thing to kind of have those in our heads and our hearts and try to, again, cast that vision and values through our dialogue and our daily interactions. But it's another thing, and it's so valuable to actually sit down and get it on paper and work through that exercise with your family. I just think that that is powerful. And just the exercise alone gets people, not just you as the leader of the home, but the entire family thinking through the same lens and getting everybody on the same page and really, making it clear, like, that's the buoy that we're all swimming towards. Let's go get it, team, versus everybody kind of going their own direction.
Yep, absolutely. I had heard it said years ago, is actually when we first moved to Cincinnati, and it was from the church we go to. Someone was on stage. It wasn't one of the main pastors, but someone was on stage, and they made this comment about, your family's vision needs to be greater than the 15-year-old boys at the school.
Oh, that's good.
I remember hearing it at the time. My daughter was about 7 or 8 years old. I remember hearing it. It stuck with me the whole time, but I kind of just, I'll get to that. That's important. Well, now my daughter's 15, and I'm very glad we have it in place. Is it memorized by everybody? No, it's not. But they know we have it. They know we are of something greater than just the day-to-day. Let's get our homework done. Let's make sure we pay the bills.
They may not have it memorized word for word, but the general premise is in their hearts, I got to think.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And then so we'll revisit it different times. I will, and I always share this with clients or friends as I roll this out to them, and I'll just do it to anyone listening. As you do this, definitely give yourself grace and your spouse and kids grace as you roll this out. For me, and as I've shared with others, it's best to kind of maybe give the idea that you want to have a vision, values, and then kind of drip it and then eventually get to working on it together. But in my typical like to achieve things and get things done, I remember when I first started it, like, let's do this, everyone, round the table now, go, go, go. And it was awful.
Oh man, I know exactly what you're saying, because that's kind of how I tend to approach things too.
Yeah.
If you lay it out as a directive, the kids are just going to roll their eyes and be like, "Oh man, here we go again." But yeah, if you can kind of make it seem like their idea, it's going to go a lot better.
Absolutely. So definitely, for anyone who's going to do it, go for the drip approach and not the fire hose.
Yeah, amen. Man, you touched on something that is so powerful that I want to go back and revisit. Just the idea of making sure that there is a vision cast for your kids that is stronger and that it outweighs that they're going to get from school and from the general, just the world, because if we don't have that in place, they're going to get it from somewhere, right?
Absolutely.
So what would your advice be for achieving that, basically? Because that draw from the world and from friends and peer pressure and all of that is so incredibly strong, and we're not always going to win over it, but over the long haul, what can we do as leaders of our home to, I don't know, at least put our best foot forward when it comes to overcoming those powers out there?
That's awesome. I believe is some of the most important things to do is to establish where they find their identity, and to remind them that their identity is not in the success of their soccer game, if they scored goals or if they didn't, or the success at dance and how they did at the recital. Because if all of us men, all of us adults, we have a tough time when we tie our identity to temporary things. If we're tying it to the corner office or how much money we make or what our job title is, what happens when it's gone? It causes midlife crises. It causes to drink more, just to be in a funk. So imagine what it does to us. And we know, because a lot of us have been there at different times where we kind of got lost, or where we're taking our questions of who we were to other places. Well, our kids are going to have the exact same issue.
Yeah.
But if they are not coached and parented and kind of led through this process, they're going to make similar mistakes that we make. And so at an early age, be affirming character over competency as much as possible.
That's good.
Not great game, you scored all these goals, but man, your teamwork, the way you led them, your heart, the way you served your teammates, and just affirming their identity. And us to take it a step further. It is to affirm their identity that they are a beloved son or beloved daughter of God, and how important that was. And we did a identity ceremony for our daughter. She's now 15, but when she turned 13, we had a kind of full on identity ceremony that was incredible, and very grateful we did it. And that was pretty powerful to help walk her through that process of, because we hear about boys having identity ceremonies.
Yeah.
But since my oldest is a girl, I didn't have that choice to get to do a boy one first. But I want to do it. We want to do a girl one. And if you get online or anywhere, there's mother to daughter identity ceremonies, but there weren't father to daughter ones that I could find. And any time that any of us have lost our way, most of the time it could be tied back to our earthly father. It's especially true for women, where if they have a poor or absent relationship with their earthly father, then it can lead to, possibly drug, sex, and rock and roll, or whatever it may be down the road.
Yeah.
And I for sure want to make sure that wasn't the case. And not only did she know me, but also she knew her Heavenly Father. So we put together an identity ceremony to do just that. And I mean, it was an incredible night and process. So anyways, those are things that we did.
I'm intrigued by those. I've referred to them as sort of like a rite of passage.
Yes.
And in fact, I've had a guest on in the last couple months ago, Pastor Tim Wright, who talks about rites of passages. And we really focused on the father to son rite of passage. So I'm curious to hear, I didn't really prep you for this question, but what were some of the things from as a father to daughter rite of passage or identity ceremony? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So all this identity ceremony, I included in my book, so it's in there for anyone who wants to unpack it more and actually see what we did.
Buy the book, guys. Buy the book.
Yeah. I don't mean to be a book plug, but if we were talking about it, it seems like, well, it's there. No need reinventing the wheel. Our identity ceremony, what we did is I took a mixture of different things that I had learned or been exposed to. And it came down to this, where my wife and I knew we wanted to do it together. We had no idea exactly what to do. I go to Crossroads Church in Cincinnati. Our pastor there wrote a book called 5 Marks of a Man. Awesome book.
Yeah.
But I could not figure out. Are you familiar with the book?
I've heard of it. I've not read it.
Oh, it's great. But those 5 marks of a man don't translate to a woman. As well. And so, but I still like that idea of 5, and I like that component. Well, what we ended up doing was went to Proverbs 31, and just through reading it, through prayer, felt God identify 5 words for us to affirm our daughter in. We just felt like these were the words that God wanted us to affirm her in. So we took these 5 words, and we thought through, hey, who are the men in my life that I see this character trait in them? I will assign them each gets 1 word, and I want them to write a letter to Kylie of what this word has meant in their life, as well as what do they see for it in Kylie or in a young woman. And so I had the men write the letter. Holly, my wife, did the same thing. She identified women in her life, assigned them 1 word, and then had them write. And it was awesome. So on the birthday night, July 1st, we had already received all the letters, and I was blown away by the amount of wisdom in these letters. And I had some men come over to the house. We talked about each of the words, and the 5 words were character, committed, generous, influential, and excellence. Those are just words that we felt we want to be affirming in Kylie. And what was so neat about it is, these men read the letters, then we prayed over my daughter. Then we went to dinner, just Holly, Kylie, and myself, came back, and Holly did the same thing with her women. And they ate dessert and, prayed over her, whatever they did. I wasn't in there. But I was outside getting a fire pit going. And they came outside, and this is probably one of the coolest parts of the whole deal, where she'd already gone over the words. She had the meeting, with some of the men, had a meeting with some of the women, had the nice dinner with Holly and I, where we were just affirming her and telling her what this all kind of meant. And so we get outside at this fire pit, and it's always cool how God puts things in our life, like seems like just perfectly timed. And like a few months before, I was riding to work, listening to Christian radio, and this woman was talking about Exodus 38:8. And I never had read the verse, or I mean, I've read the verse, but it never jumped out at me.
Mm-hmm.
But as this woman unpacked the verse, it said that women need to hand over their bronze mirrors so that they could be melted for the wash basins at the tabernacle. And the whole point of her unpacking it was that women's beauty is great, but it can't come before God.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of melting the mirrors, and I've always kind of liked those type of ceremonies, like burn the ships and other type of things where you write something down and you burn it. I like that. I like this idea of Exodus 38:8 and the women. So what we did is my wife ordered a couple bronze mirrors, and we had Kylie write all of her identity issues on the mirror, whatever they were. I don't even know what they were because I didn't see it. She's a teenage girl, so I'm sure it had something to do with weight, boys, social media likes, pressure to get straight A's, all these different dynamics for the girl. She wrote all these down, and then she threw it in the fire, and we watched it melt, and just told her that's your image, and that you're not tied to that. And then we gave her a new mirror with the 5 words embroidered on them, and said that you're a beloved daughter, and these are the 5 words. And it was an amazing night, and it was awesome.
That's really cool.
So since then, we'll bring up the 5 words, we'll talk about it. But what I do know is none of us can remember that all the details of that night, but she's going to remember that moment. And then when she's down in the dumps, or maybe she's about to make a poor decision, maybe that night, and remembering she's a beloved daughter, remembering that she's got an army of her dad's friends, her mom's friends that are in her camp, and they're fighting for her, and they're praying for her. And so that's the cool part is doing that ceremony, not only for that night, but for hopefully the years to come.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I've raised 2 teenage daughters, and it's tough. Teenage daughters are tough, and they go through some tough stuff. I tend to believe that girls at that age can be they're meaner than boys.
Oh yeah.
Not your girls necessarily, but just the girls that they encounter, and they go through some tough stuff and dark times. And you're right; they're going to have those words to reflect back on. That's almost their own like personal vision, if you will.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, they're going to think back and recall all of those loved ones, those family and friends who came out to support her. And yeah, that's just powerful stuff, man. I look forward to the day that I can do that with my son. I didn't do it with my older daughters just because the thought hadn't occurred to me those many years back. But my son, who's 11, he's getting into those preteen years, and I'm already working on ways that we can incorporate something like that into his upbringing. It's going to be powerful.
I would encourage you. I don't know how old your daughters are, but it's never too late. I mean, to get that affirmation from their earthly father, and then that of how they are loved and how they're viewed, but then that also just, calling them up I don't think you're ever too late.
No, you're right. It's not. They're the oldest is 24, and then the next one is 20. But you're right. They're always going to be daddy's little girls. So you're right. It's never too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, man. So you've done a couple things that a lot of guys only dream of. You made the leap from corporate America and started your own thing. So check that off the box. and you wrote a book, which again, a lot of people only dream of. Check that box. Congrats. And now you've got your own podcast, and I can speak from experience. That is no small feat. There's just a lot of moving pieces to a podcast. So tell us about this new podcast.
Oh, thanks. I think that's just cool of you, by the way, to support another podcast when you're in the podcast space. I love the spirit of abundance versus scarcity. So it's pretty cool, Mark. Yeah, I may have pulled the trigger on some of those items, but for anyone listening, please know that it was painful. There were days of delay. There were days of fear. There were days of all those. And then finally I got to the point to do it, and we can, unpack how all that happened. But podcast is in that same camp. I always thought about kind of doing it after I wrote the book, but just the head trash got in the way of, we do not need another podcast in this space.
Yeah.
Anyone who's going to read the book or anyone who listens to podcasts already read the book. I mean, don't do it. Don't do it. And a lot of that's the devil. And I know sometimes we all give the devil too much credit. I mean, sometimes just the fear and doubt that I was telling myself. So finally I pushed through the barrier to do it. And my heart behind the podcast is it's a lot of like what you're doing and just getting it to, another audience, since there's so many people in this country. Not everyone hears everything. But it is to interview business executives and not only hear how they won at work, but so many times I will listen to a podcast. I'll get all these leadership ideas and the success of their career and what they did. But the podcast is over, and I'm left scratching my head thinking, how did they do this and stay married and and be intentional with their kids? I mean, how did they do this? And so that's really my heart behind this podcast is I want to talk to the business leaders, and then, we'll do a couple minutes to figure out, tell us your story. How'd you get there? Great. Now let's move on. How did you navigate it? And how did you recalibrate when it got off track? And really get to the piece of that. And I look forward to when those interviews start to get released, that I hired a podcast coach and to do mine. I think you and I were talking before we got on here is once you hire a coach to do something, you're pretty quick to pull the trigger to hire a coach for anything else, because it's like, I want to learn their process. I want to get kind of on their rails, their guide, and go, as opposed to wasting time that I could be with my kids or other things, and instead of watching YouTube or reading a bunch of articles on how to do something. So anyways, my podcast coach that I hired and been very pleased with is about build a content vault of your own content first for, the first handful of episodes, and then start to pull in the interviews. I'm sure there's a ton of opinions, whether that's right or wrong. However, that's the path I went. And so here we are. So the interviews are not released yet, but they will be. But there's already some episodes up there wherever you listen to podcasts. The name of the podcast is Win at Home First, same as the book, because that's this particular project. I don't know if this is going to be my lifelong brand, but for this particular project, I want to spend some time on helping executives win at home as well as at work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the name has got some longevity to it, because it's always going to be a problem. And that problem is going to continue to evolve over time. The challenges we face today, they're not going to be the same challenges that we face 3 to 5 years from now as technology changes, as society changes. So I think you're set up to have a lot to talk about for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I joke with a couple buddies that I shouldn't have been so direct in my title, because the answer's in the title. It's like, I don't need to read the book. All the answer's right there. I got to focus on home. Come on. And if there's more to it, and maybe some mindset and motives are more to be talked about than just the title. That's for sure.
Sure. Well, the title, it does kind of touch on my last question of the day, and that is the question of legacy. We've talked a lot about this and kind of danced around it through our discussion here, but one thing I like to ask all of my guests is, when it comes to legacy, we all kind of know what that is. We all kind of a certain definition comes to mind. But when you think of an inspired legacy, if you want to leave an inspired legacy, what does that mean to Cory Carlson?
Yeah, it's great. I love that question you asked. And it is a lot of what we talked about, but that inspired legacy, it is one that those that you impact, when you have moved on, I don't mean only just in death, but just you're no longer in their sphere of influence for whatever, that you've made an impact, that they are thinking differently and greater and bigger because of what you did. And so it takes intentionality and consistently showing and living for a greater purpose.
I like it. Powerful stuff, man. And as a guy who is in the business space and with a family and, juggles life, just thanks for the work that you're doing with your book, with your coaching, with your new podcast. I think it's vital. It's critical, and we need more of it. We need more men like you stepping up and helping other men out there win at home. Cory, where can people learn more about you and follow you online and keep track of what you're doing?
Yeah, awesome. My website is Cory, Corym Carlson. If you go there, you can download a resource that a lot of people have appreciated, and 10 ways to win at home. Just some kind of quick wins of things to be thinking about. So go to the website and get that free download. And then from there, it's the podcast, book, blogs, social media, information's all right there. But please get connected, and thank you very much, Mark, for the opportunity to speak to you and your audience.
Anytime, man.
Love what you're doing.
Man, I really enjoyed that. Guys, if you got anything out of today's message, please share this episode with a friend, and be sure to check out Cory's book. Again, it's called Win at Home First, an inspirational guide to work-life balance. And again, his podcast is of the same name. Check those things out. Check out Cory online. Just so many great takeaways in that episode. Again, take 5 minutes, you guys. If you feel so inclined, take 5 minutes and leave an Apple Podcast review. That really helps the show climb the ranks and help get noticed. And please know, again, I say this over and over again, but the objective of reviews isn't for my notoriety at all. It's just to get the message of our guests and the entire message of the Inspired Legacy in front of more men all over the world. And finally, if you're listening to this, you're likely a man of action. You might be looking for something more in life, or maybe you want to know more about the Christian faith and how it could help you become a better man, a better husband and father. Whatever brought you here today, I want to invite you to our private Facebook group. Again, this is a closed group, and in it, you're not only going to find other like-minded men, really men of all ages and walks of life and degrees of faith for that matter, but men who are all focused on the same thing, to learn and grow, to sharpen each other, lift each other up as we all battle life together. If that sounds like something you're going to be interested in, again, check out that group. It's free, it's private, you're not going to regret it. And there's a direct link to that group in today's show notes. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. Thanks again for listening. And again, if you got anything out of today's message, remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share our message, because when we work together to lift up fatherhood, we're going to change the world one dad at a time. Until next time, live inspired.